just like seeing her for the first time.
Extended his hand towards them, and then pointed the tip of his spear towards them, ordering his lizard to rush to attack. As soon as the lizard struck, they both jumped back, and then Tian pushed off the wall and rushed forward. The lizard noticed this, and when landed very close it swung its paw, and at this time he held out his sword in front of him. The beast slack-flashed its tail forward, sending a powerful stream of wind towards it, which forced him to increase the distance between them. And then he pushed off and rushed forward again, but this time the lizard lord was heading towards him. Their blades collided with a loud clang, and they both increased the distance between themselves. The lord mounted his lizard, and it began to release tongues of flame from its mouth. Then a powerful stream of fire gushed towards the man. He wanted to block the blow with his sword, but Junio created a shield in front of him in time, thereby protecting him from the powerful stream, and he himself continued to stand aside watching the fight. At that moment, the lizard moved forward, throwing Tian back, and he, landing next to Junio, asked, "Isn't he a weapon?" Smith, he replied that a shield can also be a weapon. Has he ever been hit with a shield? He lit the sword with flames and said with a smile that when they get out of here, he will need to ask him about many things. After these words, he rushed towards his opponent, and Thelazard, Lord, waved his hand, throwing a chain from the spear, which had a tip. This chain hit the sword and twisted around the blade, after which the lizard lord jerked his hand back, pulling the enemy towards him. Tian was drawn straight towards the lizard's open mouth, and Julio, noticing this, extended his hand forward and told him to stop messing around and fight. He dispelled the weapon in Tian, letting it go, asked with a smirk, "Didn't he ask to test it?" A new weapon appeared in his hand, and MC tiredly told him to take care of his pet. After that, the chain-wrapped weapon that hadn't yet dispelled flew over the lizard's head, and Tan delivered several slashes to its mouth. Seeing the blood splattering, the monster was surprised, and then the man threw a sword at him, but he managed to dodge in time. In the blink of an eye, Tian got very close to him, and then kicked him with all his might, throwing him aside. The lizard lord fell from thibity of his pet, and Tian at that moment rose high into the air, and swinging his sword lit it into flames again. What he saw made the monster nervous, and he didn't have time to do anything, and then he received a powerful blow that took away his arm. Realizing that he couldn't handle him, he turned his gaze to Junio, who hadn't participated in the fight, and grabbed his spear and rushed straight to him, but MC was ready for this, and just before the blow he erected a shield in front of himself, making the monster nervous, and then asked with displeasure who he thought he was pointing a weapon at. At that moment, Tian appeared behind the monster, blazing with bright flames. Lizard Lord didn't know what to do. He was pinned down from both sides. Meanwhile, the people outside continue to watch the gate. Seeing that the color changed to blue, they were glad that the gate was opening, and someone asked if the ad really enrolled the dungeon. After that, the guild team came out of the portal, and journalists immediately ran to Tian, wondering what was in the dungeon and what happened to the boss. The guards fenced him off from them, and who asked if he was injured. He replied that everything was fine, and his guild members thanked him behind his back for his help, and the girls said that if it weren't for him, they would have already died. Juno, meanwhile, handed over that collected resources to the man, and said that he received the money in advance, so he needed to go. He thanked him for his excellent work, and MC, taking one last look at the team, simply left. One of the journalists meanwhile reached the head of the guild and asked how he managed to clear the dungeon so quickly. For him it must be easy as pie. He turned around and said that he was not alone there, but not seeing Junio behind his back, he froze. The journalist asked if he had figured out while the whole team was defending themselves. The archer confirmed these words, and the warrior standing next to him said that their weapons had broken. They had no idea how dangerous it was. If it weren't for the guild leader, they would have been destroyed long ago. Tian was surprised by their words, and grabbing the warrior by his shoulder exclaimed that the one who made them weapons should be thanked for them. Thanks to him they lasted so long. The guy asked in confusion who he was talking about. He replied that he was talking about the support who was there as an assistant. He was also a weaponsmith. The warrior, still confused, looked at him in surprise, and then awkwardly scratched his cheek and turned to the girl, saying that he knew the assistant was a support, but did he really have such abilities? She replied that she wasn't sure, After hearing their answer, Tian turned to the rest of the team and asked. If they hadn't seen him create weapons, they all didn't understand what he was talking about, and someone asked if he meant a pickaxe. They looked at the backpacks they left behind where the pickaxe should have been, and someone said that he didn't even have that. Someone else from the team replied that he had a pickaxe, but he must have lost it. However, he had collected all the mana stones. Tian was confused and wondered what happened. He created weapons for them all, and they seemed to have forgotten about it. He remembered Ho Junio asked him to forget everything for creating the weapons and wondered in surprise, was this payment? How did he use Saya's skill that was a rank or higher? His friends called out to him, not understanding what was wrong with him, after which he threw the case with the gun into the hands of his deputy and ran off to look for Junio, and he called out to him loudly. He and his secretary looked after him in confusion, and he continued to run and look around, thinking, where did he go? Did he really leave suddenly? He stopped, and Junio was nearby and hiding behind a brick wall. Not seeing anyone around, Tian realized that he would not catch up with him, and at that moment, his guild members ran up to him wondering what happened. He turned to Hu and said that right now, Han needed to find someone. Hearing these words, MC pursed his lips in annoyance and closed his eyes. Then left. Time passed, and soon Hu came to the guild leader with the news that she had determined the location of Shin Junio. He entered the Drank dungeon near Segu around PM with a group of 5 people. He said that she did a great job. It was just around the corner from here. She notified him that she wanted to ask him something and said that Junio was just a D rank creator. Why was he so interested in him? Tian looked down at the tablet and asked if she thought so. Thought that of course he was a D rank creator, otherwise it was hard to think. He looked at his general information and thought that his status background, according to all the information, he was D rank, but he has AFE. This one's skill refutes everything. Fee is an A rank skill. As a fee for creating a user's item, it can make Thelander submit to the request. The nature and obligation of the request depends on the user's qualification. The qualification of the fee was very high. He had never met anyone who could use it like this. The ability to get rich was set to hide one's identity. A weapon like that could level up easily, but he would find out when they met him that time. He felt something he had never felt before. He remembered the feeling of holding the sword Junio had created and thought Thoth could fight at full strength without worrying about the weapon breaking. He had met many swordsmiths who were considered the greatest, but as soon as they presented him with their new products, he would pick it up with hope and try to use his skill on it. Even though these swordsmiths were confident in their products, but as soon as he dealt a powerful fire strike, he was immediately disappointed, because they all broke in the end. The swordsmiths were confident in their products, clutched their heads when they saw them broken. None of them lived up to Tian's expectations. Not to mention that the ability to create is limited to the type of normal weapons, but he creates something that greatly exceeded the ability and type limitation. It was as if there were no limitations with Junio's ability. It's possible this is something he didn't use because he didn't have the right weapon. The time to clear a Dranked dungeon with a team of 5 is usually around hours. There's about an hour left. With that thought, he got up from his chair and asked Hesu what was left on the schedule for today. She replied that he had a meeting with Guildmaster Hugh at PM. He passed her on his way to the exit and asked her to cancel the meeting. He'd leave early, Hugh hinted, to make sure he didn't miss it. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon, the team was fighting the orcs. A warrior stabbed at him in the stomach, causing him to die, and he watched his corpse fall, surprised, thinking that it couldn't be. Did Theo's assistant really make that sword? If that much mana could destroy a boss's weapon, it should be at least a C-rank ability, maybe even more when his weapon fell apart. He thought they were finished, but he never imagined that their assistant would have such an ability. He picked up the sword and laughed out loud, saying that it was simply amazing. He had never seen such a high-quality sword. He turned to Junio and thanked him for his help, then asked the girl if he was not in any guild. Maybe they should take him to theirs, she said. That was a great idea. And he said that he thought it was embarrassing for him to be an assistant. She asked if that was true, and he laughed in response, saying that he had a keen eye after listening to their conversation. MC turned his gaze to them and thought that he used more mana. Than thought the team is suffering so much, even though it's not even a glitch dungeon. He walked to the place where the mana stones grew and threw his backpack on the floor, thinking that if he had some mana left that time everything would have been different. In that dungeon, he felt an incredible amount of mana that he had never felt before. After defeating the golem, when he used it all up, it didn't appear anymore. What he feels now is no more than the mana of an awakened D rank, but he is comforted by the fact that there is no problem with creating weapons. He created a pickaxe and looked at it with the thought that who would have thought that Moris could help so much. The basic skill of a creator is creation, which helps in creating special items. All thought skill is very intuitive. The quality is proportional to the amount of mana used. There is one way to increase the efficiency of the skill, but it is still unknown. This is the level of comprehension. The higher the level of comprehension of the item being created, the better the quality. And the best thing about this skill is that, as the quality increases, the efficiency of mana also increases. So when using the same amount of magic and creating the same item, depending on the level of comprehension, there will be a significant difference in quality. He remembers how much he trained when he learned about this hidden feature, studying the material, training the support, going to the workshop for a weapon crafting class. But he got more than he expected. He started mining monostones by swinging his pickaxe and thought that he didn't know how much better it was, but compared to the amount of mana used, it seemed like more than just an addition. However, it was still not enough. It was hard for him to use crafting and payment at the same time with equipment that affects mana was expensive, so there was no way he could get it now. He could at least buy a mana potion, which was the only mass-produced item that affected mana. He needed to order a couple of those potions, but with assistant salary it would still be difficult for him. However, no one would hire a drink support, so he had no choice. Anyway, he opened the window with the passive skill mana absorption and thought that the result was not bad. It was coming. There was very little left to reach the goal of mana absorption %. A couple of dungeons would not be enough. One protected dungeon is just over 1% to low efficiency. There is only one way left. Go to the dungeon with a bug. This is the only way to absorb a lot of mana at once. There, compared to other dungeons, several times more mana is absorbed. This is exactly the place he needs. He remembered Tian and thought that the problem is that the bug is hard to detect before entering the dungeon. The previous dungeon with a bug would have been difficult to pass, if not for that person. After collecting all the M-Man stones in his backpack, he went to the team members with the thought that he needs to find a dungeon with at least AC rank boss and prepare the only way to grow as a drank awakened is to know the reward of mana absorption. Soon the team successfully cleared the dungeon and went outside. Everyone thanked each other for their cooperation and said goodbye, and MC, noticing that they did not say a word about his ability, was glad that he erased his memories. Suddenly, a familiar voice, saying his name, made him freeze. He immediately turned around and saw that the Overkill guild leader approaching him along with secretary. Tian asked if he remembered him hearing this. MC realized that the skill didn't work on him. Then he sighed heavily and asked if he would believe him. If he said he didn't remember, he handed him a business card and replied that he wouldn't believe him. He took it and asked what business he came for. He replied that he needed to talk to him about something. Let him give him a minute of his time. Looking at the information on the business card, Mick thought that Overkill Guild was one of the best in Korea. He can't join such a big guild, yet he needs to find an excuse to leave. After putting the card in his pocket, he turned around and said that he didn't have time. He was in a hurry for an important meeting, but Tian wasn't going to let him go so easily and put his hand on his shoulder, saying that he wouldn't regret this conversation. It wouldn't take long and he would also pay for dinner. Junio noticed the displeased look from his assistant and said that being the guild leader must free up a lot of his time since he was spending eating a D-rank support. He replied with a smile that it might be so, after which MC looked at him closely and thought Thoth didn't really like it, but he needed to check how well the payment worked for him. Passing by him, he agreed to talkingly if it was quick, and Tian smirked, agreeing. After that, they arrived at a restaurant and took a table in a private room. When the table was set with various dishes, MC asked what business the Overkill guild leader has with a D-rank support like him. He doubts it's because he has a lot of free time to chat with him. Tian said that, from what he saw, he's a berserker because of his incredible strength. He needs a weapon that can withstand such a load. So the most important thing in a baker's job is to find a supplier of suitable weapons of Of course, he went to many places to look for it. He traveled around the country and beyond, starting from a blacksmith, who was called the best in his field, and ending with weaponsmiths. If there was even the slightest opportunity, he would order a weapon, and time and money would not matter, but every weapon he had could not withstand his ability, with one exception. The sword that had created the protagonist's face showed no emotion, and he understood only one thing: the agreement had absolutely no effect. He didn't think that Berser had a nullification skill. That was very careless of him. He needs to be more careful, using that skill on high-ranking hunters. Tian called out to him, and said with a serious expression that he would ask him directly. He wants to join his guild. His proposal made, who, surprised and said that he already knew that he was not a member of any guild. If he joined, he promised he would only get the Bessie would pay him $1,000,000,000 for joining, and they would also pay for the operating costs and dividends separately. Would make a contract for a year, and each time it was renewed, the fee would increase by percent. The rest of the details would be in the contract. Junito didn't let him finish, and stood up from the table apologizing to him and saying that he didn't plan on joining the guild for now, so he would have to refuse if that was all he was leaving. Thanked him for the food with a slight smile, and then left the room, and Tian called out to him, trying to stove him, who asked why he made such an offer. He couldn't do it without a reason. She wanted to say something about the conditions, but he interrupted her, and said that if she had experienced the same thing he did, then she wouldn't have said that it had been a long time since he hadn't felt the scream of a weapon. With such a weapon, it seemed that he could do anything, and it held up. She wanted to object, and he, taking a sip of his drink, said that, of course, it wasn't only because of this feeling. How much did she think all those high-ranking weapons he destroyed in a year cost? His words made her remember that he spent truly astronomical amounts on weapons. Despoteth, fact that they break, unable to withstand the load. If the weapon is not above a certain rank, it will not allow the guild leader to use his abilities. After thinking about it, she agreed with him and said that if it were possible, Thon, such a fee for making a contract is really insignificant, but for now the problem is that no one is capable of Zach. A thing considering those who are called the best. The fact that he has such an ability. He did not let her finish, and said that he can definitely do it. She flinched, and he continued saying that therefore no matter what haste, he wants to recruit him at any cost. Time passed. MC walked down the street inside, thinking that who would have thought that the day would come when he would refuse the top 3 guilds in the top overkill, and Yunnan, it would help him a lot, but it is too early for now. It's okay, he just needs to be patient. He will definitely find him again. Meanwhile, in an unknown dungeon, there were a bunch of goblin corpses lying on the floor, and the hunter witnessed his comrade being cut off of them. After catching his breath, he looked nervously at the one who did it. Asked who he was, the man plunged the sword into the hunter's body, and said that it was quite entertaining at times, like these people usually whine and beg to be saved before they pass out. The one who will become the hero is different. He looked at the only survivor with a smile, and the guy asked why all of a sudden he wanted to kill them and take the trophy. Replied that it was not that boring. He did not want to tell him. He pulled the sword out of the corpse and said that he thought telling something to someone who was about to die would be a waste of energy, but he would tell him, I've defeated him. He threw the sword over his shoulder with a smile and told him to come to him quickly if he did not want to die. The hunter gritted his teeth and thought that he was definitely a difficult opponent. He would die at a distance. Deciding to close the distance between them, he rushed forward with a loud cry and thought that he had to go in if he lost an arm or a leg. In response, the man put his sword in front of him, blocking his blow, and the hunter screamed loudly, putting all his strength, after which he began to throw new blows, which he parried. Watching the sparks caused by the blows of the swords, the man suddenly knocked the weapon out of his opponent's hands, throwing it high above his head. The hunter looked up at the sword in surprise, after which his opponent kicked him with all his might, throwing him to the other side of the hall. The hunter hit his back against the wall and trembled in pain, and he said that it was so sad dragging the sword along the floor. He walked towards him and said that he volunteered because this was the first destruction of a hero, but who would have thought that he would turn out to be only a small fry, but the courage it took to do this is worthy of praise. When his shadow covered the hunter, he asked him for forgiveness with tears in his eyes and began to beg for mercy, but he did not care and raised his sword over him. smiling, saying that he will deal with him. After that he dealt him a fatal blow from which a lot of blood spurted. He looked down at him with disappointment and curse, saying that he thought that for the first time in a long time he would have to fight. But this is not even a warm-up. What is with that expression of injustice on his face? Let him not worry, he will report that he fought bravely with the boss and died a hero. Taking out his phone, he took a photo off corpse and said with a smile that this is a common thing in a dungeon with a rank error. After finishing with Thish, looked through the photos and said that this is not bad, the collection has been replenished. Then he flipped through the photos of the rest of the dead and added that his whole life is dedicated to collecting. Suddenly, for some reason, it felt a chill. He told the priestess with displeasure that he hated feeling this vile energy. Let her either hide, eat, or not hide anymore. The doors to the hall opened and the priestess entered. She waved at him with a smile and apologized, saying that she was in a hurry because she heard that there were valuable components here. He pulled a sword out of the corpse and replied that there were only idiots here. So he said not to listen to him and wait a little longer. She walked past him and, without letting him finish, threateningly asked, did these words mean that he to go against the will of the executioner? Her body was enveloped in energy, and he sighed with displeasure, saying that she was so sensitive. He just said it like that. Let her clean up here. She used her abilities and agreed, telling him to leave everything to her. She was a pro at this. He reminded her with a gloomy expression about her promise that she would send him after Anne shrank. Hunter, because of this consciousness or something, he needs to kill them. He can't use his power to the fullest. He goes with her only fourth. This priestess approached the hunter's corpse and, creating a bloody magic circle over it, told him not to worry. She would contact him soon. A glow appeared inside the wound on the corpse, and he asked who. This time, someone's claw paw appeared from the body of the dead hunter. The monster climbed out, and the priestess, looking up at him with an admiring smile, called him a child and happily exclaimed that he was right. A tall monster like a man whose body was burning with energy appeared in front of her. Time passed. A new day came. Association guards and ordinary lookers crowded at the open gates. Junio, who arrived to clear this dungeon, noticing someone familiar, looked at him with displeasure. Tien, who also came here, hid his face, adjusted his cap, and asked if he was here. There was silence between them, and after a short pause, the MC asked what he was doing here. He said that he had good eyesight since he recognized him right away. He noticed the case on his back and said that he only knew one person who carried a weapon like that. So what is he doing here? He replied that he was going to the gate. Junio clarified, a D-rank gate. Tien replied that the guild member who was supposed to go suddenly fell ill, so he would go in his place. Junio didn't believe him and was about to ask what the point was, but suddenly one of the members called out to them and said that it was time for them to go. Tien passed by him and suggested that he enter the dungeon, and he looked after him thinking that he knew he would find him again, but he didn't think it would be so soon.